Silence is not empty. Silence is full. In a world that constantly urges us to speak, to react, to explain, silence becomes a radical act. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. Not a gap to be filled, but a space to be entered. The Buddha understood this not merely as a matter of etiquette or discipline, but as a profound doorway to wisdom. In the ancient texts, it is said that after the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he remained silent for 7 days. He did not rush to explain, to teach, to proclaim what he had seen. He simply sat, eyes open, still as the forest around him, contemplating the truth that had unfolded within. That silence was not uncertainty. It was not confusion. It was the silence of fullness, of completeness, of having nothing to add. This is the silence we rarely touch in our lives. The silence that is not waiting to be broken, but inviting us inward. Deeper than thought, softer than breath. The silence that reveals what words cannot hold. To listen to this silence is to begin to hear the teachings that do not come through sound. The rustle of leaves, the breath moving through your chest, the space between heartbeats, the slow shifting of shadows on the wall. In silence, the ordinary becomes luminous. Each moment stands alone, perfect in its simplicity. When we sit in meditation, we are returning to this ancient silence, not forcing the mind to be quiet, but letting it slow down, soften, open. The thoughts may still come. The world outside may still hum with life. But beneath it all, silence waits, patient, undisturbed, not needing anything to change. And in that silence, we meet ourselves, not the self of stories, of roles, of ambitions, but the self that simply is, without decoration, without defense. The silence strips away what is false and leaves only what is real. It does not criticize. It does not compare. It holds everything just as it is. There is a reason the great masters speak so little, or when they speak, they do so with such clarity, such calm precision. Their words come from silence, not from ego, from presence, not from performance. Because they have touched something deeper than knowledge. They have learned to trust the stillness that holds all things. The Buddha once responded to a complex philosophical question, not with an answer, but with silence. His students waited. The question hung in the air. And then they understood. Not all truths can be spoken. Some truths can only be seen, felt, known beyond thought. This silence is not nothing. It is not a void. It is alive. It is awake. And in its presence, we begin to wake up, you can feel it even now, if you listen not with your ears, but with your whole being. The hush beneath the words, the space in which this moment lives, the awareness that is quietly watching, noticing, receiving. That silence is you. In the stillness, there is no pressure to perform, no mask to wear, no identity to defend. You are not your voice. You are not your opinions. You are not your accomplishments. In silence, all these melt away, and what remains is pure being, spacious, open, free. Silence invites us to let go, to stop pushing forward, to stop holding on. It asks nothing and offers everything, not in the language of goals, but in the language of peace. Even the breath becomes a teacher in silence. Inhale, and you feel the body rise. Exhale, and you feel it release. You do not need to do anything. Life is moving through you, gently, patiently, without effort. And when the mind wanders, as it does, silence calls it back, not with force, but with kindness. The same way a mother calls her child home as the sky darkens. The mind returns, settles, softens. Again and again, we come back to the quiet truth beneath all things. It is here, in this silence, that insight arises not as a sudden thunderclap, but as a soft light dawning over the landscape of the heart. You begin to see clearly not with the eyes of judgment, but with the eyes of awareness. You begin to listen not to the noise of the world, but to the wisdom beneath it. Silence shows us what we truly are. Not isolated individuals, but part of something vast and interconnected. Not voices shouting into the void, but beings resting in the same stillness, breathing the same breath, held by the same truth. The path of silence is not always easy. It reveals things we have tried to hide from ourselves, from others. It brings up the noise inside us that we thought we could drown with distractions. But if you stay with it, if you gently, patiently return again and again, you will see. Silence does not hurt. It heals. In time, silence becomes not just a practice, but a refuge, a home, a way of being. You begin to carry it with you not just in meditation, but in daily life. In conversations, in decision-making, in moments of conflict, in times of beauty. You no longer speak from compulsion, but from clarity. You no longer react from fear, but respond from peace. This is the sound of silence, not the absence of noise, but the presence of wisdom, the steady hum of truth, the quiet knowing that beneath all the movement there is stillness. Beneath all the voices there is peace, and that peace is not far away. It is here, now, closer than thought, softer than sound, always waiting, always listening, always ready to welcome you home. There is a silence that arises from shyness, and another from fear. There is silence in moments of awe, and silence in moments of grief. But in the teachings of the Buddha, there is a particular kind of silenced, intentional, mindful, compassionate. It is called noble silence, not because it belongs to the noble or the elite, but because it elevates the heart, because it is rooted in awareness and guided by love. In the early monasteries, when disciples gathered to practice together, they did not speak casually or fill the air with conversation. They honored silence as sacred, not as something imposed, but as something chosen out of respect for their own mind and for the minds of others. It was understood that words carry weight, that they ripple through the world, and that every word not spoken was space left open for insight to rise. Noble silence is not suppression. It is not holding your breath or biting your tongue. It is not closing off from life. It is a gentle restraint, a turning inward, a listening that goes deeper than speech. It is an invitation to become more present, more attentive, more real. When we stop talking, we begin to hear the sounds around us, the rhythm of breath, the subtle movements of emotion, the patterns of thought that otherwise pass unnoticed. Silence sharpens perception. Like dust settling in still air, the mind becomes clearer. And in this clarity, we begin to see that not all speech is necessary. So much of what we say is habit, commentary, reaction, noise. We speak to fill gaps. We speak to impress. We speak to defend, to escape, to control. But what if we didn't? What if, in the space where words would normally arise, we paused, we waited, we felt? The Buddha taught that right speech is part of the path to liberation. To speak only what is true, useful, and kind. But before right speech, there is right silence. The silence that precedes wisdom. The silence that makes room for compassion. The silence that checks the impulse to react and chooses instead to respond with care. To live with noble silence does not mean to never speak. It means to speak from a deeper place, from stillness, not from noise, from clarity, not confusion, from love, not ego. Even in the marketplace, even in the home, even in the middle of conflict, noble silence can be practiced. It begins not with the mouth, but with the heart, not with volume, but with intention. You can be silent while someone speaks to you still be fully present, not ignoring, not planning your reply, just listening, with your whole being, with the kind of attention that heals. You can be silent when emotions rise, and feel them fully, without turning them into weapons of speech. You can be silent in the face of misunderstanding, and trust that not everything needs to be explained. This silence is strong. It is not passive. It takes courage to be still when everything inside wants to react. It takes strength to remain quiet when others speak from anger or confusion. But noble silence does not mean disengagement. It means groundedness. It means listening first, so that when you do speak, your words are medicine, not noise. Monastics often observe silence for hours, even days. But noble silence is not reserved for monasteries. It can live in you wherever you are. It can be practiced in the pause before a conversation, in the quiet space after someone speaks, in the decision not to respond to gossip, in the gentle closing of the lips when judgment arises. It is not about isolation. It is about intention. You begin to notice that silence can hold more than words ever could. In a moment of sorrow, a hand held in silence may comfort more than any sentence. In a moment of joy, shared laughter without speech is enough. In love, sometimes the deepest connection is formed not in conversation, but in simply being together, in stillness. And then, slowly, noble silence becomes your teacher. It shows you your inner weather. It reveals the tides of the mind. It humbles you, softens you, opens you. You learn that not everything needs to be said, that some truths deepen in silence, that some healing happens only when we stop trying to explain. As you walk through life with this silence, you begin to carry a refuge within. You no longer need to fill every moment with talk. You no longer fear the space between words. You rest more easily in what is. You may speak less, but when you do, it comes from somewhere true, and those around you feel it. They feel the peace behind your words, the patience behind your presence, the clarity behind your gaze. This is the gift of noble silence, not withdrawal, but depth, not distance, but closeness. It teaches us to speak, not to prove, but to connect, not to win, but to understand, not to be heard, but to hear. In the silence, you meet yourself, not the self that talks and plans and performs, but the self that simply watches, the self that is always present, always calm, always listening. And in that meeting, you begin to remember, you are not your words. You are the silence that holds them. You are the pause. You are the space between. You are the stillness that remains, always waiting, always wise. When the world grows loud, we turn inward, and when we turn inward, we enter the landscape of silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of being. This is the heart of Buddhist meditation, not to escape sound, but to discover the quiet that has always lived beneath it. At first, the silence may seem distant. We sit with closed eyes, and the mind begins to race. Thoughts flood in, memories, to-do lists, fragments of conversation. It can feel anything but silent. But slowly, as we breathe and soften, we begin to notice that there is a silence deeper than thought. It is not something we create. It is something we uncover. The breath becomes the anchor, each inhale, each exhale, drawing us gently into the present. The noise of the world fades not because it disappears, but because we stop clinging to it. In this space, the silence is not quietness in the ears, but stillness in the heart, a vast, open presence. The Buddha taught that meditation is not about controlling the mind. It is about observing it, letting it be, watching its movements without being carried away. And as we watch, we begin to see a truth that cannot be learned from books, that beneath all the doing, all the striving, there is a natural awareness. It is spacious, receptive, silent. This is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of wholeness, of enough. It asks for nothing. It waits for no reward. It simply is. And within this isness, there is profound peace. You do not need to silence your thoughts. You do not need to force the mind into stillness. The silence comes when you stop resisting what is, when you allow each thought to rise and fall like waves in the ocean, nothing to hold, nothing to push away. In meditation, silence is not separate from sound. It is the space that holds all sound, the hum of a fan, the chirp of a bird, the beating of your heart. These are not interruptions. They are part of the silence. They arise within it, like clouds moving through the sky. And you, too, are held in this silence. Just as you are, no need to be better, wiser, calmer. You are already enough. Right here, sitting, breathing, aware. The more we return to this stillness, the more familiar it becomes. Not a special state, not a performance, but a natural way of being. Like a home we forgot we had. The silence welcomes us back, again and again, no matter how far we've wandered. There is no need to chase enlightenment, no need to grasp for visions or revelations. Meditation is not a destination, it is a returning, a gentle falling back into the ground of presence. The silence that was always here, and in that silence, something begins to shift. We start to see clearly, not with the eyes of analysis, but with the eyes of awareness. We see that thoughts are just thoughts. Emotions come and go, like weather. The body changes, the world moves, but the silence remains. It is constant, it is kind, it does not judge, it simply holds. And in being held, we soften. We stop fighting. We stop needing things to be different. We sit with joy. We sit with sorrow. We sit with pain. We sit with love. And all of it is welcomed. All of it is held. The silence does not reject anything. It has room for all. Even in discomfort, there is peace when we stop resisting. Even in noise, there is quiet when we stop reacting. Even in darkness, there is clarity when we simply remain still. This is the true power of silence in meditation, not to escape life, but to embrace it, to see it as it is, without distortion, without fear, without need. And this silence is not limited to the cushion or the temple. It follows us quietly into the world, into the street, the office, the kitchen, the crowded bus. When we listen deeply, we carry that stillness with us. We respond from it. We act from it. We live from it. Meditation plants the seed. Silence nurtures it. And over time, a new way of being begins to grow. Less reactive, more present, less hurried, more whole. The Buddha did not teach silence to remove us from life. He taught silence to return us to it, to open us to the fullness of each breath, each step, each moment. Silence is not the absence of life, is the gateway to living it more deeply. So we sit, we breathe, we listen, we let the noise come and go, we let the thoughts rise and fall. and we rest in the space that holds it all. No grasping, no judging, just being, just this breath, just this silence. And in that silence, we remember who we are, not what we do, not what we think, not what we fear, but what watches quietly behind it all. The one who is simply aware, simply present, simply here. Silence has a wisdom that words cannot hold. It is not what we say, but what we do not say that often reveals the most. In the teachings of the Buddha, silence was never emptiness. It was insight. It was restraint. It was love. In the early days of his awakening, the Buddha encountered many who questioned, challenged, even provoked him. They came with complex ideas, philosophical traps, and eager arguments. But often, instead of responding with words, he remained quiet. Not in avoidance, not in defeat, but in profound clarity. This silence, called noble silence, was his teaching. He understood that some questions arise from confusion, not from the desire to know. Some arguments are designed not to uncover truth, but to protect the ego. In such moments, he offered no reply, because to speak would not bring peace, it would only feed the fire. In this way, silence became the highest form of speech, a refusal to engage in confusion, a protection of inner peace, a message that the deepest truths are not spoken, but lived. When you begin to trust silence in your own life, something begins to change. You no longer feel the urgency to explain yourself. You no longer feel the pressure to defend every thought, every feeling, every mistake. You begin to understand that silence does not mean you have nothing to say, means you do not need to say it. There is power in that stillness, not the power of dominance, but the power of awareness, a quiet strength that does not need to shout. Wisdom does not rush to speak. It watches, it listens, it waits, it sees the ripples caused by words, and chooses carefully. Sometimes, it chooses not to speak at all. We live in a world that praises loudness, loud opinions, loud personalities, loud reactions. But in the Dhamma, wisdom is quiet. It walks slowly. It speaks gently. It chooses when to speak and when to remain silent. This does not mean withdrawal from life. It does not mean apathy or passivity. It means seeing clearly. It means understanding when words are helpful and when they are not. It means knowing that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to say nothing at all. To sit in silence with another person is a rare and beautiful thing. No need to entertain. No need to impress. Just presence. Just shared being. In that stillness, the heart speaks more clearly than the mouth ever could. And when we are alone, silence teaches us to, in the absence of conversation, the mind becomes our companion. We begin to see our thoughts more clearly. We begin to hear the stories we tell ourselves, the fears, the regrets, the longings. In silence, these stories come to the surface, and gently, without judgment, we begin to question them. Is this true? Is this helpful? Is this kind? And often, we discover that many of our thoughts are not. They are habits of mind, patterns of conditioning. And in that discovery, we are freed, not by fighting the thoughts, but by seeing them in the light of stillness. Silence allows us to notice, to feel, to understand. Sometimes, in silence, an old memory rises, a buried sorrow, a forgotten joy. We do not need to push it away. We do not need to hold it. We simply watch. The silence makes space for healing. In Zen tradition, a teacher might respond to a student's deep question with nothing more than a bow, or a single gesture, or silence itself. Why? Because awakening is not something you are told. It is something you see, and silence helps you see. It is in the silence that we feel the breath most clearly, that we notice the movement of time, that we sense the impermanence of all things. It is in silence that we realize how fleeting each moment is, and how precious. And then, something else happens. We begin to live differently. Not loudly, not dramatically, but gently. We speak less, and when we do, it is softer. We listen more. We react less. We stop rushing to fill the space. We start honoring it. We see that silence is not a void. It is full of presence, full of knowing, full of love. This is the wisdom of silence, that it holds everything without grasping, that it receives the world without clinging, that it sees clearly without needing to fix. The Buddha's silence was a mirror. It showed others their own mind. It did not impose. It did not resist. It simply reflected what was. We can be that mirror, not to correct, not to teach, but to be present, to listen without agenda, to offer the quiet gift of attention. In this way, we carry the wisdom of silence into our lives, not just in meditation, but in every encounter, in every decision, in every breath. We begin to live from stillness. We begin to trust the quiet, and in that quiet, we hear what is truly important. Not the noise of the world, not the shouting of the mind, but the soft voice of the heart, always present, always waiting, always clear. There is a silence that deepens our connection with others, not by pulling us apart, but by drawing us closer. In Buddhism, silence is not isolation. It is not distance. It is the presence that arises when we are no longer caught in the need to control, impress, or speak just to fill the space. Silence in relationships is the space where real understanding begins to bloom. We often believe that communication means words. That connection comes through explanation, storytelling, reassurance, and sometimes it does. But before words, there is presence, and before connection, there is space. Silence is that space, a space where we can truly meet one another, not through ideas or opinions, but through awareness. In the stillness between two people, there is room to breathe, room to see, room to feel. There is no pressure to perform, no need to be clever or wise or right. There is only presence, the kind that says, I am here, and I see you, and I do not need you to be anything other than what you are. This is a powerful gift to sit with another in silence, to allow them to speak when they're ready, to allow the quiet to stretch without fear. In this space, trust grows, and when words do arise, they come not from habit or compulsion, but from truth. The Buddha once said, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. In our relationships, we often say too much and listen too little. But silence teaches us that peace is not found in the quantity of words, but in the quality of attention. To listen in silence is not to remain passive. It is to become fully receptive, not preparing our next reply, but softening into the presence of the other. Listening not just to words, but to tone, to pause, to what is felt but unspoken. It is in silence that we begin to hear what someone truly means. There is a way of being silent that says, I am with you, not interfering, not judging, not solving, just with you. In your joy, in your pain, in your Sometimes that is all that is needed. Not advice, not answers, just shared stillness. And what about conflict? What about the sharp edges of misunderstanding, disagreement, or pain? Silence here is not avoidance, it is refuge. When tempers rise, silence can become the ground that steadies us. a breath taken before a reaction, a pause that saves 1,000 regrets, a softening of the need to be right. We begin to notice that not all things need to be said. Not every correction needs to be spoken. Not every wound needs a response. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing we can do is hold silence, not to punish, not to withdraw, but to let healing take root in stillness. Relationships are not built only through words. They are built in the quiet gestures, the shared glance, the hand on the shoulder, the peaceful sitting side by side. These are the moments that leave deep marks on the heart, not because they are loud, but because they are real. Silence can also be a form of honesty. There are times when we do not know what to say, times when nothing will make it better, times when all we can offer is our presence, and that is enough. In fact, that is more than enough. And then there is the silence of love, not the dramatic kind, not the romantic story, but the deep, still love that requires no declaration, a love that watches without demand, that walks beside without needing to lead, a love that says, "You are free, and I am here." In Buddhist practice, loving kindness is often cultivated in silence, not through elaborate speech, but through simple attention, sitting quietly and sending goodwill toward another without needing them to know. This invisible gift, given in silence, changes everything. It changes the way we see them. It changes the way we hold ourselves. It changes the way we walk through the world. To bring silence into a relationship is not to remove connection. It is to deepen it, to bring mindfulness into how we speak and how we listen, to recognize the impact of our presence beyond our words, and to trust that being fully with another is the greatest gift we can give. We do not need to narrate everything. We do not need to fix everything. Sometimes, sitting with someone in silence says, "I see your pain. I trust your strength. I know this, too, will pass." In the deepest relationships, silence is not uncomfortable. It is not awkward. It is a place of rest, a place of return, the space where love breathes. In time, we learn that we can hold silence together, not as a break from speech, but as the ground beneath it, a sacred pause, a quiet that says, "We are safe. We are understood." We do not need to fill this space, because this space is already full with care, with respect, with something deeper than words. This is the gift of silence in relationships. It teaches us to wait, to breathe, to let go of the need to always be heard. And in that letting go, we begin to truly hear each other for the first time, again and again. There are wounds that cannot be spoken. There is sorrow that words only touch, but never truly hold. And there is a kind of healing that does not come through talking, thinking, or solving, but through stillness, through presence, through silence. Silence is the space where healing begins, not because it adds anything, but because it removes the noise that covers what is already whole. Beneath the struggle, beneath the confusion, beneath the pain, there is something untouched, something still, something complete, and silence leads us back to it. When we sit in silence not as escape, but as attention, we begin to notice what hurts. We notice the tightness in the chest, the ache in the belly, the heaviness in the limbs. We feel the sadness that we kept busy to avoid, the anger we swallowed long ago, the grief that never had words. And in that noticing, we soften, not to fix it, not to push it away, just to see it, just to hold it. The way the earth holds rain without resistance, the way the sky holds clouds without trying to change them. The Buddha taught that healing does not come from running from pain, but from meeting it with awareness. Silence creates the space for that meeting. In stillness, we stop distracting ourselves. We stop numbing. We stop chasing relief. We just sit and breathe and listen. And what we begin to hear is not just pain, it is the voice beneath the pain. The voice that says, I am tired, I am afraid, I am hurting, and I want to be held, not with answers, not with solutions, just held, just seen, just loved. This voice does not shout, it whispers, it waits, it lives in the silence, and it only rises when we become quiet enough to hear. In that moment, healing begins. Not because the pain goes away, but because we are no longer fighting it. We are no longer alone with it. We are simply present. And presence, in its purest form, is medicine. To sit silently with our own heart is an act of compassion. It is an offering, a gentle return to what has been pushed aside. We may cry, we may tremble, we may remember things we thought we had forgotten, but in that remembering, something softens, something opens. We begin to trust that we do not have to run. Silence holds us like a deep forest, like still water, like the night sky. It does not ask for anything. It simply receives. And in being received, we begin to feel whole again. There are times when even the kindest words feel too heavy. Times when advice only deepens the confusion. In those moments, it is silence that heals. The silence of a friend who says nothing but sits nearby. The silence of nature. The silence of the breath as it moves in and out without effort. These are the moments we learn that healing is not doing it, is allowing. Letting the body rest. Letting the heart be felt. Letting the spirit be quiet. In silence, the stories we tell about our pain begin to dissolve. We stop identifying with the wound. We stop clinging to the blame. We stop rehearsing the reasons. And in that stopping, we begin to see we are more than what happened to us. We are more than our sorrow. There is a life here still unfolding, a light still shining, a strength still alive beneath the surface. This does not mean the pain disappears. It may return. It may visit again and again. But silence teaches us how to be with it, not as enemies, but as companions. We learn to sit with discomfort without collapsing. We learn to breathe through fear. We learn to watch sadness come and go like weather. And the more we return to silence, the more we begin to trust it. Trust that we do not need to figure everything out. Trust that some things take time. Trust that healing is not a destination, but a process of returning again and again to the stillness within. The Buddha compared the mind to a pool of water. When the water is agitated, we cannot see through it. But when it is still, the truth becomes clear. This stillness does not happen by force. It happens by resting, by being, by waiting. In silence, the sediment settles, and the light begins to shine through. There is a tenderness that grows in this stillness, a deep compassion for ourselves, for others, for all beings who carry burdens we cannot see. We begin to look at the world not through fear, but through understanding, not through resistance, but through acceptance. We stop needing to rush our healing. We stop needing to explain it. We start honoring it. We start trusting the slow, natural rhythm of life as it unfolds. In silence, we return to the truth that we are not broken. We are not wrong. We are not alone. We are part of something vast, something ancient, something deeply alive. And that something speaks, not in words, but in stillness. The healing power of silence is not dramatic. It is not quick. It is not loud. It moves like water through stone, like roots growing beneath the earth. like light slowly rising over the mountains. You do not need to chase it. You do not need to understand it. Just sit, just breathe, just be here, and let silence do what only silence can do. It will hold you. It will soften you. It will heal you. In the stillness of deep silence, something begins to shift. The mind, so used to naming, dividing, comparing, begins to fall quiet. The layers of thought, belief, and identity soften, and in their place, a new kind of knowing arises, one that does not speak in words, one that does not argue or define, but simply sees. This is the nature of reality, as seen through the eye of silence, not as we wish it to be, not as we fear it to be, but as it is: fluid, impermanent, empty, interconnected. Silence does not add anything to reality. It removes the filters. It clears the fog. It opens a space wide enough for truth to appear, unshaped by thought, untouched by preference. The Buddha called this seeing yathabhatana dadanastarek, knowledge and vision of things as they truly are. Not theory, not belief, experience, lived, felt, embodied. And it begins in silence. When the mind stops clinging to its stories, when it no longer rushes to label each sound, each thought, each moment, what is left is space. And in that space, we start to notice everything is moving, everything is changing. What we thought was solid is not. What we clung to as permanent is already passing. This realization is not sad. It is freeing. We begin to see that life is not a collection of separate things, but a dance of conditions, causes, and effects. Nothing exists alone. Nothing arises without something else supporting it. This is the heart of dependent origination, the insight that everything is connected, interwoven, co-arising. And it is silence that reveals this. Because silence does not interfere. It does not interrupt. It watches. It listens. It allows. When we sit in silence, we may start to notice the sound of the wind outside, the sensation of breath entering and leaving the body, the pulsing rhythm of the heart. These are not separate events. They are all part of a single unfolding moment, a single field of awareness. There is no boundary between you and the world. The breath you inhale was air just moments ago. The warmth in your hands comes from the sun, from food, from the earth. The thoughts you think are shaped by the people you've met, the language you speak, the culture you live in. In silence, we see that what we call I is not one thing. It is many streams flowing together. And when those streams grow still, the illusion of separateness begins to dissolve. This is what the Buddha pointed to when he taught Anat, the truth of non-self. Not that you do not exist, but that the self is not what we think it is. It is not fixed, not solid, not independent. It is a process, a pattern, a dance of causes and conditions. Silence allows this to be seen, not as an idea, but as a direct experience. In stillness, we may begin to feel that awareness itself is not personal. It does not belong to anyone. It simply is. Thoughts come and go, feelings rise and fall, but awareness remains. Silent, open, unchanging. And from this silence, compassion arises. When we see that others are not separate from us, that their fears, their hopes, their wounds are our own, in different forms we begin to soften. We no longer judge so quickly. We no longer cling to the need to be right. We begin to live from a deeper place. We see that everyone is struggling in their own way, that everyone is longing to be at peace, that beneath the noise of the world, there is a shared silence waiting to be remembered. And when we return to that silence again and again, we remember who we truly are. not the roles we play, not the name, the job, the history, but the presence behind it all, the awareness that watches, the stillness that holds everything. In silence, reality reveals its nature, not through effort, but through surrender, not through control, but through letting go. You do not need to understand everything. You do not need to solve every mystery. Just be still. Just watch. Just let each moment rise and fall, without grasping, without resisting. And in that openness, truth reveals itself. You are not separate from the wind. You are not apart from the stars. You are not outside of time. You are not behind your breath. You are the breath. You are not a thing in the world. You are the world, experiencing itself. This is not something to believe. It is something to feel. And it is silence that opens the door. So we sit. We listen. We rest in the awareness that holds all things. We do not name it. We do not chase it. We do not try to make it into something. We simply let it be. And in that letting be, we find peace, not because we have figured out life, but because we have stopped needing to. Reality, in its purest form, is silent. It does not argue. It does not rush. It does not explain. It simply unfolds. And we, when quiet enough, can move with it, not as a thinker, not as a doer, but as presence itself, awake, still, whole. There is a silence that begins in stillness but does not end there, a silence that moves with you not just when you sit in meditation, not just in quiet temples or deep forests, but in the middle of life itself. This silence is not the absence of sound, not the withdrawal from the world. It is a presence, a way of being, a truth that walks beside you. To live in silence is not to retreat from the world, but to meet the world differently, to meet it with a quiet heart, a soft mind, a still gaze. The noise of life does not disappear, but your relationship to it transforms. You no longer react to every sound, every word, every event. You no longer chase or resist. You let things be as they are. And in that letting be, you discover peace. The Buddha did not only teach silence in the forest. He taught it in cities, on roads, among kings and beggars, among the noise of daily life. Because real silence is not in the it is in the heart. It is in the space between stimulus and response, in the gap where choice is born. When you begin to live in silence, you stop rushing to speak. You stop filling space with noise. You listen more. You feel more. You respond with care. Words become fewer, but deeper. Actions become gentler, but clearer. Even your presence begins to speak, for silence has a presence, a weight, a lightness, a calm, and others feel it. In your stillness, they may find their own. In your calm, they may soften. In your silence, they may begin to hear themselves more clearly. You do not need to preach. You do not need to explain. Your very being becomes the teaching. You begin to carry silence into every corner of your life, into conversations, into decision-making, into the way you move through your day. You take pauses. You breathe. You create space before you act. This is not hesitation. This is wisdom. This is seeing clearly. Even the mundane becomes sacred when approached in silence. Washing dishes, walking through the market, sitting at a red light all become moments of practice, moments of presence, moments of returning to the now. And the now, when fully met, is always silent. It holds the hum of traffic, the rhythm of footsteps, the murmur of conversation, but beneath it all is a stillness untouched, a deep background of quiet that supports every movement. To live in silence is to stay connected to that background, even while participating in the foreground. You may still laugh. You may still cry. You may speak when needed, and even raise your voice when justice calls for it. But even in those moments, the silence remains. It becomes the ground from which you speak, the ground from which you act. This silence is not passive. It is not detached. It is alive, awake, aware. It sees clearly and loves fully. It does not judge, but it knows. It does not grasp, but it responds. It does not withdraw, but it stays rooted in presence. To live in silence is to live in mindfulness, not as a technique, but as a natural expression of being awake. You begin to notice the little things, the way sunlight falls on the floor, the sound of your own footsteps, the pause before you speak, the feeling of water on your skin, the stillness between thoughts, and you begin to see that everything passes, that every sound ends, every moment fades, every thought dissolves, and yet to remain, not the personality, not the identity, but the awareness itself, silent, watching, open. This is freedom. Freedom from needing things to be different. Freedom from being pulled by every thought, every craving, every fear. Freedom to be here, in this exact moment, without resistance. Living in silence means carrying peace within you, even when the world is loud. It means listening more deeply to others, to nature, to your own inner voice. It means speaking with intention, acting with compassion, seeing with clarity. You no longer need to fill the space. You honor the space. You live from it. And slowly, silence becomes your teacher, your guide, your refuge. It shows you what truly matters. It shows you where you've been grasping. It shows you how to let go. You learn to trust the pauses, the endings, the spaces in between. And as you do, you begin to touch something timeless, something beyond words, beyond concepts, beyond form. You touch the essence of reality itself. You come to see that everything arises from silence and returns to silence. Every sound, every breath, every moment. And so do you. When the body is gone, when the mind is still, what remains is this silent awareness, spacious, free, at peace. This is not a silence you have to reach. It is already here. It has always been here. Beneath every thought, beneath every fear, beneath every story. It is the silence of the present moment, the silence of truth, the silence of your true nature. To live in silence is to live in alignment with this truth. Not perfectly, not constantly, but gently, faithfully, returning to it again and again. This is the path of the Buddha. This is the gift of silence. And now you carry it with you, not just in your sitting, not just in your sleep, but in your breath, in your being, in your life.